It is so good to be up here and to be with y'all again. I so miss it when I'm not here. Did y'all feel like you missed it all summer? I kind of had FOMO a little bit, like I was missing out on something, like we should be meeting because by not meeting, we're missing out on something, right? I kind of have if I ever miss awakenings on a Thursday morning, I have fear of missing out. Right? I feel like I'm missing out on something great going on. I have a more intense feeling of FOMO, fear of missing out, than most people. I just hate to miss a party. I hate to miss something good. I think it goes back to, for me, some years ago, going to the Dixie Stampede. How many of you have been to the Dixie Stampede? It's an experience. I was not well prepared for our Dixie Stampede gathering. We went, the four of us, myself and Alan and our two kids. They had some age on them, probably middle school, high school at the time. And it was Christmas time. And we were going to be kind of in the Dollywood, over in that area. And we said, well, you have to go to Dolly Parton's Dixie Stampede. And I knew that it was what I was told was it was a dinner theater. And it, by loose definition, real loose, it's a dinner theater. I did know that they were going to have ostrich races. This I had heard, and that was going to be the highlight of the evening for me. I've never seen, how many people have seen an ostrich race? Right? Like not many. Okay, so I wanted to see the ostrich race. That was very important to me. But we went in and sat down. And for those of you that haven't been to the Dixie Stampede, they do serve dinner as you are seated. But the thing is, you're seated in kind of stadium seating around this big arena, the open arena. And it's there. The dinner show is like horses and riders, and it's like a rodeo in this ring, and they're kicking up dust and sawdust and other things. Right? And you're sitting right down there on it. Which I thought, I'm a good mother. My kids were, let me just, a disclaimer, I would do it again because my kids loved it. Every minute of it did they think it was phenomenal. And so I was just right with them. With that, we were just several rows back. We were right down close. And but unbeknownst to me, I kept waiting for the tray to drop down. You know, when you're on a plane and they say, we're going to serve the meal now, and you reach up in front of you and you put down that tray and they bring all the stuff. That doesn't happen at the Dixie Stampede. That doesn't happen. They have no flatware. There's not a fork in the building. There's not a knife in the building. They just serve you the food, and you gnaw on it. Like King Henry VIII. Y'all, this is not a lie. They bring you a whole chicken. Per person. Oh, now imagine one of those whole rotisserie chicken, right? Like a robust one, like you get it like Costco. I don't know how many antibiotics those have been fed, right? But they're enormous, busting out of that top, right? And they just hand it to you. The servers for our thing were young men, typically. I'm sure there were women also, but they were dressed like elves. This is Christmas time, and they had jingly hats on and little pointed-toe shoes, and they were dressed like elves. And they would come around with an enormous metal pan, and they just walked in front of you and handed each person a whole chicken. And you just take it. Those of you who know me well know that was just way out of my comfort zone. But of course, I'm acting like this is delightful. We're having a great time. And the horses are running by and throwing up stuff, and I'm gnawing on a chicken. You might imagine that the floor is slick. Right? The floor's slick. There's no need to go into that. But it is. And so the waiters are coming around with these huge things, and they're handing a chicken and a chicken and a chicken. I think there's also a pork loin you're served. I mean, it's a lot of food. And you eat all of it with your fingers. And our guy would come by and he's handing everybody, and we've all got a mason jar of drink, and we've all gnawing on our chicken. And the show is going on. It's just going on. And it's almost like a rodeo, all kinds of riding and stuff. And it's exciting. It's fast paced, and it's moving. And of course, I'm thinking I'm here for one reason. Do y'all remember? Ostrich race. I want to see the ostrich race, which I guess they know that there are other people in the room that want to see the ostrich race. So they're saving it kind of for the end. And we're gnawing on our stuff, and I think they even served a cup of soup, but it was thick, but you had to drink it as you're gnawing on your chicken. And this is going on, and we're in a cloud, right? We're just in a cloud of dust, and gnawing on our chicken. And I'm waiting on that ostrich race, and our guy comes by again with, I think now he's got the pork loin he's serving. And he's coming down, and you might imagine this pan is really, really heavy. And it also is not, if that I will say the juices in the pan, as they start sloshing a little bit, he's a little out of balance. You know, he's kind of coming by. I happened to be on the end. So it was the kids actually, and then Alan, and then me, and then the walkway up, the stairs up. I wanted to be on the end. I just wanted to be on the end where I just didn't know. Whatever I needed to do, I was kind of free to do it, right? So I was on that end, and the guy would come down, and he's serving each of them, and he's serving. I'm kind of, helping everybody know what they're supposed to do, and they're bringing it down. And he would come to me, and I would get my thing, and then he'd go up the steps. And he's coming by, and he's got this big thing full of pork, and he's walking by us, and he's clearly having trouble with that tray. And he got to me, and I almost want to say to him, "Can I help you? Is there anything I can do to, But I reach in and get whatever it is, we got to get. And I got it, and as he was turning to go up those steps, that pan got tilted, right? It got tilted towards me. And he is on that slick floor in these little elf shoes. And as he made that turn, y'all, he slipped and he threw that pan of pork loin onto me. There was no recovering, right? There's just no... He's fallen, the pan, the pork loin everywhere, most of it on me, and all of the grease. Now, it wasn't so hot that it burned me. I was not burned, but I was covered. So I managed to help him up. Alan couldn't even, I was on my own. I was just on my own. He wanted to help me, but it was beyond his capability. This was a situation he was not prepared for in marriage. So I managed to get the young man back up, and I got up, and I just turned to Alan and said, I've got to go to the restroom, right? So I got my purse, which would have some kind of wipes in it, and off I went, squishing all the way to the bathroom. And y'all, I would have just said, we're done. Everybody to the car. But the kids were really enjoying it, and I was going to see the ostrich race. So I squished off to the restroom, and it took me forever. I mean, I had to go in and basically disrobe, and try to get bunches of paper towels and wet them down and try to get to a point where I could just function. That's where the bar was, right? Just function. I got cleaned up enough. It took me a while. I got my nasty clothes back on and squished back to my seat. And do you know, when I got there, they were doing stuff in the arena, and I turned to Alan and I said, I just want to stay through the ostrich race, and then we're leaving. And he turned to me and said, they just did it. There wasn't an ostrich out there. There was nothing like that. And I said, they finished it? I mean, they brought the ostriches out? Did men get on the ostriches? He said, yes, it was unbelievable. Men got on the ostriches. And then I said, are you saying that just to insult me and rub insult into injury because you know I wanted to see it? And he said, no, Ann, I hate to tell you, you missed it. I said, then we're leaving. But when I think of having the fear of missing out, I'm back at the Dixie Stampede, right? At the ostrich race. That I still, to this day, have never seen an ostrich race. Here's what I believe is going to happen in these days together. I believe the opposite of that. I believe that in our time together, God is going to open our eyes to see things in the Spirit, to see things that we've never seen before, and to see things with greater clarity than we ever have before. That you're not going to have a fear of missing out. You're going to be overwhelmed at what is going to be given to you, what is going to be ministered to you. It's going to be, in contrast to missing out, I believe God's going to give us spiritual sight. We're continuing in the season to lean into a word that I have shared with you before. It's become a part of our household. Matthew 13, verses 16 and 17. This is our card today. Has this verse on it, so you have it. Matthew 13, 16, 17. Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and they've come to him and said, why aren't the people getting what you're sharing? And he says, that's not the question is, here's what I want you to know, he says to his disciples, blessed are your eyes because they see, and blessed are your ears because they hear. Truly, I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see and didn't see it, and they long to see what you hear and they did not hear it. It's the foundation for our series that we're going to be launching today, and we're going to dive deep. We've entitled, But Now I See. I want you to get used to that title. I want you to get used to, when you're getting out of bed in the morning, declaring that over yourself as a confession. But now I see. Today I see with greater clarity than I did yesterday. I believe we're going to see more in the Spirit with greater clarity. Like when Saul, the scales came off of his eyes. It'll be that profound. That profound. Alan loves to do the jumble. I love the jumble, but not like Alan loves the jumble. The jumble is a fun thing in the paper every day of 5 days a week. Does anybody do the jumble? Okay, a few. We have a few jumblers. They're words, scrambled letters, and you have to unscramble the word. And there's several words, and then at the end, you take a few letters out of each word, and you solve another word or a phrase. And so Alan was doing the jumble one day, and he couldn't really get it. He was having trouble with one word, and Alan's a word person, but he's committed not cheating. He will not look something up But he is a word person, so he rarely enlists my help. But on this particular morning, he asked me, he said, come in here and look at these letters. There were some E's and H's and B's. And we looked at it, 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 and we pored over it. And we finally came up with the only thing we thought it could be. I mean, it was the only thing. We rearranged those letters and rearranged those letters. It had a Y in it, and, you know. And finally, I said, it's got to be, the word, it's got to be Heraby. Heraby, that's all it's got to be. I've heard of heresy. How many people have heard of heresy? Like a heretic, a person who doesn't believe. I thought it's Heraby. It's got to be Heraby. And so we wrote it down, and Alan said, that doesn't look right. And I said, I don't know if that's a word, but we wrote it down. And it was sitting there on the counter, and our daughter, who was in high school, walked through the room. And we were still saying, I don't know if that's a word. But Alan won't look it up. You know, I'm just saying, but, you know, do we? And she walked through the room, and she said, you got it. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, we got that word. And she said, well, I mean, I said, what, Heraby? And she said, Mom, hereby. You can project it. Project this word. My husband has written books. I was like, Heraby? There's heresy. Heraby? We were all into it. Here's what I want. Here's my point. It was right in front of us. It was right in front of us, and we didn't see it. What if God's been active in your life, powerfully, unmistakably, remarkably, on your behalf for your whole life, and you just hadn't seen it? Wouldn't having a revelation of that change everything? Wouldn't it give you an explosive faith for the days ahead? There have been times where he rescued you. You may not have seen it, but he did it. Times where he saved you. Times where he made provision for you, where he opened doors for you, where he protected you, where he blessed you in particular ways. I want to invite you in these weeks to come with me, and we're going to be treasure hunters. The image I had was like the 49ers when they were panning for gold. We're going to be looking for nuggets of gold. We're going to call them God sightings, or Alan would call them God moments. We're going to look back over our past, and we're going to see God. We sing a song called Waymaker. It's one of my favorite songs. And the words of the bridge of Waymaker are this: even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. He's always been there since before you took your first breath. I want you to join me in a treasure hunt. How you see God in your past informs the way you live today and how you engage your future. Alan said in his book, God Moments, the way you remember yesterday determines how you will live tomorrow. I mean, Noah. Let's think about some of the patriarchs, the great men of faith. Noah, who hauled cypress wood, hammered planks, and gathered animals when there wasn't a cloud in the sky, because he remembered the day God had spoken to him. Joseph, who graciously forgave his brothers who betrayed him because he remembered it was God who gave him a dream, and who has set him above others, appointed him as ruler of Egypt. Joshua, who marched around the walls of Jericho for 7 days without a ladder or a battering ram because he remembered how the waters of the Jordan had parted. David, who ran towards the battle because he remembered how God had saved him from the paw of the bear and the paw of the lion. Paul, who never forgot the blinding light or the striking voice that spoke to him outside Damascus, but he repeated it everywhere he went. Paul said, let me tell you what happened to me, even to King Agrippa, saying, I was not disobedient to the vision. Charles Spurgeon said this, it's a delightful and profitable occupation to mark the hand of God in the lives of the ancient saints. To think about Noah and Moses and Paul and Joshua. It's a delightful occupation to mark the hand of God in the lives of the ancient saints and to observe his goodness in delivering them, his mercy in pardoning them, and his faithfulness in keeping his covenant with them. But would it not be even more interesting and profitable for us to remark the hand of God in our own lives? Ought we not to look upon our own history as being at least as full of God, as full of his goodness and of his truth, as much a proof of his faithfulness and veracity as the lives of any of the saints who have gone before? I want you to come with me on a treasure hunt. Genesis 28:10, we're going to look just for a moment at the life of Jacob. God has been throughout the ages known as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And yet Jacob was a man who was totally unaware that his life was connected to heaven, that God was at work, had always been there. His life up until this passage is a portrait of striving and deceit, clawing to get ahead. He cheated his older brother out of his birthright and the blessing. And after he did that, he's on the run. His mother, who's a co-conspirator to his stealing the blessing. And the thing was, Jacob had had a word spoken over him when he was in the womb, a prophetic word of how his life was going to be guided and directed by God. And yet still, he was a deceiver and a man of striving. And so he's on the run. He's on the run. I want to start at Genesis 28:10. He's running because his brother wants to kill him, wants to murder him. And in verse 10 of Genesis 28, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. And when he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. And taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and he lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And there above it stood the Lord. I want you to listen to this. And the Lord declared, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abram and the God of Isaac. He said, I want to be clear to you, Jacob, who I am. I've been here all along. I'm the God of your father and of your father's father. I'm the God of your past. And I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. God said, I'm in your past, and I'm going to be in your future. I love what he says. I am with you in verse 15. I'm with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, and I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to see this promise fulfilled. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it and called that place Bethel, which means house of God. Surely God was in this place, and I wasn't aware of it. Jacob received a transforming revelation the events of his life were undeniably connected to heaven. Gave him a whole new way of viewing his life. Surely God was in this place and I didn't see him. I want us to be treasure seekers. God's going to transform us into women who don't say, I don't see him, but to women who clear our true identity. Blessed are my eyes because they see. Blessed are my eyes because they see, both in the good time and the bad. And we're going to share so many stories. I have many, many, many testimonies and stories of God. And God's going to be stirring us up and opening our eyes to see amazing things. I wanted to share one story with you. We typically see God in the good, don't we? When life is happy, we can just see him everywhere, in the blooming flowers and the beautiful day, even in the clouds. We're just so thankful to see him in the good times. But do we see him in the rough times? We're going to look back and we're going to see God. You're going to see God, and it's going to change everything. You are going to be transformed. I wanted to share a story about a precious gal in our church, wonderful couple. We have a wonderful ministry here called Healing and Hope. We found that as we were praying for folks after church on Sunday morning, we have short prayer time, that there just wasn't enough time for some folks. So we developed a ministry. This was many, many years ago, decades, where we have trained folks who you can make an appointment and come to the church and have an hour or two with a group of prayer warriors and prophetic folks and folks that have wonderful gifts, and they will meet with you and minister to you. And it's wonderful. The gal who really heads that ministry up is a gal named Bridget Blackwell, who is just a delight. She and her husband, Marion, are both involved in that ministry. And Bridget shared a story some time ago with me from her past, and it came up in my spirit as I was thinking about this morning. So I called Bridget. I've actually had several conversations with her. Couldn't be here, or I'd have her up here telling the story, but she's at work this morning. This story took place when Bridget was a young woman. Her children are now grown. At the time, Bridget and Marion lived outside of Florence, South Carolina, and Bridget said, we lived in the country. In the country. I mean, we went down a country road to another country road, and then you turned off on a secondary road, and then you went to a third road, and a fourth-ish road, and a fifth-ish road, and then to the dirt road. And they lived in the country, but fairly close to Florence, South Carolina. Bridget and Marion were not believers. Bridget would say very clearly and very strongly that she was not a believer in those days. And she had recently given birth to their second child. So they had their oldest son, who was a couple years old, and then she had this brand new baby, Caroline. And you know what it's like when you have a new baby, you're just at home. You're just at home. She was just at home. She said so much so she hadn't gone anywhere that they had started going out and starting her car just to make sure it hadn't died, out in the driveway. And Marion came home from work one evening, and he said, listen, I want to bless you. I'll keep the kids, and you can go to the Walmart by yourself. or the grocery store. You can go to the grocery store, just you. And I know you young women, let me applaud you, because there is a thing called self-care now, and that is important, and it's very important to take good care of yourself. But we didn't have that as I was raising my children. This was self-care. Your husband said, I'm going to give you the happy birthday. I'm going to let you go to the grocery store without the children. And it was a delight, was it not? And so Bridget just said, she just said, okay. She went out, she got in the car, she fired it up, and off she headed. She said as she was driving down the road, she began to meditate on her life. Bridget said she was not a believer, and she was very, very unhappy with her life. She said, I would describe myself as utterly miserable. And therefore, she said, I was a train wreck. She said, now, the hormone issues didn't help. The lack of sleep did not help. But she said, I actually had the thought as I was driving down the road towards the grocery store, what if I just drove into a tree? She said, I'd begun to just make some really poor decisions in my life. So she's on her way. She's on the back roads, back in the farmland. And don't you know it, the car starts sputtering and dies. And she manages to get off the side of the road. Now, she's just on a secondary or less road out, in the cornfields. And a ways from, not close to anything. And she tries and tries and tries to get the car to start. She finally gets out, and I think she puts, looks under the hood like she would have some idea, what was going on. And she gets back in the car. She said she was sure she had flooded it by then. She had tried so many times to start that car. But she said after some time, a car pulled up. She said, nobody's out there on this road. A car pulls up next to her. And a nice young man said, asked her what the problem was and could he help. And she said, my car has died right here. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, let me take a look, and he looked under the hood. And he said, I have a wife at home. And he said, I would not want her out here under these circumstances. And he said, they couldn't get the car started. And so he said, do you want me to just take you home? And she said, yeah, you just take me home. So she climbed in the car. And she was comfortable at first. She said she was just giving him directions towards home. And he was kind of going towards home. But a couple times she said to him, I would take a left here and he would take a right. But she said he would say things like, I have a cousin who I think we can stop by his house. I think he can get your car started. And she said, I thought, well, no, just take me home. Just take me home. Well, I'm not worried about that car. I'll deal with it later. And I asked Bridget, I said, when did you become suspicious of him? And she said, we came to a main road, which it would be very clear which way you would go if you were going to take me to my house, and he would not turn the way he needed to go. She said, I began to try after he did. She said, he just became quiet. He wouldn't talk to me anymore. And she said, I began to try to reason with him. She said, I began to describe my life to him. I've just had a baby. I have a 2-year-old son at home. I really need to go home. My husband's waiting for me. She begins just recounting her life to him. She said the car was traveling at a speed that was too fast for her to jump out. But she said at one point he rounded a curve and he slowed down enough that she just decided she was jumping. And she at that same moment, he became aware that she was going to do that. And as she opened the door and started to leap out, he grabbed her and yanked her back in the car. And while the car was moving, he reached over and pulled the door closed and locked it. And Bridget started saying things like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. And he began to say things like, it's just you and me now. And she said, here's the thing. I wasn't a believer. But she said at one point, he said, it's just you and me now. She said, I said, and God. She said, I have no idea where that came from. And God. She said it was clearly he was looking for a place to pull off. And they came to a dirt road that ran through a field, farmland, cotton fields and soybean fields. And she said, we turned on this dirt road. He kept the car moving fast. And she said, as they started down this dirt road, she said, you could see an old tobacco barn at the end of the road. And Bridget said, I had that thought, this is going to be the end. He's going to rape me, he's going to kill me, and this will be the end. They got close to the end of the road, and as soon as the car slowed down enough, Bridget managed to get out of the car and start running. And he stopped the car, and he chased her down. And she said he threw her to the ground, and he drug her back to the car and threw her up against the car and then began just to beat her unmercifully. She said he was hitting her, and he was kicking her. She was on the ground. You have to keep in mind, she's just had a baby. And a couple times, or at least one other time, she managed to get to her feet and start running. And he, of course, caught her, drug her back. And he declared during one of these beatings, they had a knife, she didn't see it. But I asked Bridget, what were you doing while this was happening? And she said, I was crying out to God. I was crying out for him to save me. And I said, so just in your spirit, were you just saying, God, help me, God, help me? She said, no. I was screaming it at the top of my lungs. She said, I could hear my cries echoing off the fields. I was screaming, crying out to God. Just, God, save me. God, save me, as he was beating me. She said in the middle of what was the last beating, he said, I've got a gun. He had threatened with a gun earlier. And she said he had to step towards, like it was in the glove compartment. And he stepped to the front of the car and he reached in to get it. And she said, I thought it's now or never. And she took off again running. I said, well, Bridget, what you have on your feet? And she said, I'd had shoes on my feet. But she said, by this time, I had no shoes on my feet. And she said, I began running, and she said, I could see some woods on the other side of a field. And she said, if I could get into the woods. So she said, I was running for all I was worth. And she said, I didn't know if he was following me again or if he was going to come in the car after me. But she said, I just ran. And she said, I managed to get into the woods. And I said, did you just think, I'm going to hide until it's dark? And she said, no, I was just saying, I've got to get help. I've got to get help. So she said, I continued just to run full throttle through the woods as best I could. And she said, I came out on the other side of the woods, and there was a main road on the other side of those woods when I got there. And she said, of course, I had the thought of, I don't want to go up on the road because if he's in the car, he'll find me. And she's having those thoughts, but she said she got up on the side of the road just looking for a car. She said it wasn't any time, and here came a car, and she realized it was not his car. And as it got close to her, she realized it was a highway patrolman. And she said he pulled up, and she said I was absolutely hysterical. And he got her, and he was putting her in the car. And she said he must have thought I was a nut because I was saying, a man tried to kill me, but God saved me. A man tried to kill me. She said, I'm weeping and I'm ecstatic. And I'm weeping and I'm ecstatic. A man tried to kill me, but God saved me. She said in that highway patrol car, Jesus became real to her. She saw God. And that's really when she was born again. It was that day in the patrol car. The man was called, as a whole miraculous story in and of itself, went to prison. Bridget physically healed of all her wounds. Of course, her life's never been the same. She had a God sighting, and everything changed. 1 year later, she and her sister decided they were going to take their kids to Busch Gardens. So she said, we loaded up the car with everybody, all the kids, and my sister and myself, and we're driving to Busch Gardens. And she said, as we got close to Busch Gardens, it occurred to me that this was about, we were not on, but very close to the anniversary, the 1 year anniversary of the kidnapping. And so she said, I said to my sister, you realize it's been a year since that. And she said, my sister said, shook her head, and she said, wow, I know that was the worst day of your life. And Bridget said, I looked over and said, no, it wasn't. It was the best day of my life. How might your life be transformed as you look back and see God? He's always working. Even when we don't see him, he's working. Even when we don't feel it, he's working. We may not be women characterized. I don't want us to be women characterized by our Harabees, right? He's right there, and we just don't see him, right? May we be women whose lives are forever changed by life-giving God sightings. I want to be a woman of who Jesus would speak, blessed are your eyes because they see. that we would rise up every morning and declare in the Spirit, I see with greater clarity and I see more today, but now I see. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your goodness to us, for your mercies that are new every morning. We thank you that you are here. And Lord, I ask that you'd begin even now to stir up within us eyes that see. I just declare over the women under the sound of my voice, blessed are our eyes because they see, and blessed are our ears because they hear. Lord, we want to be women like Saul, who had scales fall off of his eyes, and he saw the gospel. He saw Jesus. Everything was clear. And he was changed forever. Lord, I thank you for the hope that you're going to be imparting in the weeks to come. I thank you for the life that you're going to be imparting in the weeks to come. I thank you for the peace, healing, for the restoration. We are yours, Lord. We say, have your way. You are good. You can be no other. So, Lord, come begin this wonderful, precious work in us today. We would see Jesus. And we won't be the same. In the wonderful and precious and powerful name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Amen.